G'day campers, how are you? And welcome back to another Thursday Night Live. Tonight I'm pumped. We're talking about acknowledgement, and it's something that I love doing. It's something that I love exploring. It's something that I like to get curious about. And tonight I've got three people with us that are right in my corner alongside me being able to acknowledge people. They're people that have meant something to me in my life. And I'm really grateful that we get to sit here and talk about acknowledgement together. So first things first. G'day, Stace. How are you?
I am fabulous. Thank you. Good to see you all again.
I love it. And thank you for being here tonight. And I love the fact that your setup isn't perfect tonight for you. And we're going to learn how to sit and embrace the opportunities that life gives us.
It's all about a different perspective, isn't it?
Very much so. And tonight you'll be learning a whole new perspective. So thank you for being here tonight.
It's a pleasure.
Giddy up. Mr. Jones, Martyn Jones, how are you, mate?
Hey, Scott, I'm good, thank you. You?
Yeah, fantastic, actually. Plenty of
Always
opportunities
good.
everywhere.
Yep.
So thank you for being here tonight and embracing this conversation. So,
sure thing.
No worries. And Kim Dunlop, how are you, mate?
I'm really good, thanks, Scotty. Great to be here.
Well, look, thank you for coming back and having this conversation about acknowledgement tonight. And Kim, I'm actually going to open it up with you because you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago talking about acknowledgement, talking about acknowledgement within the workplace, talking about how do we acknowledge people. And I want to open it up with our conversation because we sat with it and we sort of believe that we need to be able to acknowledge each other a little bit better in all aspects of life. So I thought, what a great conversation to have. So here we are. Do you want to broaden the conversation for people so they can sort of understand where we came to it from?
Yeah, I think we started by talking also like acknowledgement being the biggest word, but then the other thing is complimenting and counting. I think we use those words in our discussion. So we all tend to naturally discount ourselves and we forget to kind of count ourselves and what we're doing. And I think how our conversation evolved was partly around, you know, if you're in a good space, are you complimenting others? Or if you're in a bad space, are you complimenting others or acknowledging others? And really recognizing, you know, the great things that they're doing. And yeah, you and I were kind of pulling it apart. And then that's why we both got so excited about talking about this tonight. And we're being joined by two other beautiful people who I love, Martyn and Stacey, to really just kind of understand this a bit more and going, why aren't we acknowledging ourselves and why aren't we potentially acknowledging others? And I remember, and I don't know whether I shared this story with you, but yeah, I remember acknowledging myself in, you know, saying that I had a great day and in front of a few people. And some lady turned around and said to me, "Oh, well, you sound like you're a bit full of yourself." Oh. And I thought it was really quite interesting. And I sort of said, well, where in the book does it says that we need to keep on putting ourselves down? So I think, you know, with acknowledging people in any environment, whether it's family, workplace, you know, I think it's really important that we start to really acknowledge, but then notice also if we aren't acknowledging others and their good work, you know, because maybe we're not having that relationship with ourselves. So, yeah, I think that was kind of around the theme.
Yeah, very much so. And it was because I think that's something that you and I generally sit in when we have our conversations. We try to acknowledge each other as much as possible so that we feel seen and heard.
Yes.
So with that in mind, I'm actually going to open up to Martyn and Stacey. I'm just going to open up with the first question. Do we need to acknowledge each other? And I'm actually going to throw it over to you, Martyn, if that's okay.
Well, it's an easy answer, yes.
Can you give us some context to that?
Well, I think, to acknowledge, I was just thinking then, like when I go to the gym, I always make sure if the cleaners come in, I say hello. And it's just, to me, that's like an acknowledgement
Yeah.
because, I speak to the manager, I speak to the people on the desk, I speak to the cleaners. It doesn't matter what they do. I like to acknowledge them so they feel seen, and hopefully it might improve their day, in some way, lifting people up. Isn't that what we're here for, to help lift other people up?
Yeah.
So, acknowledging, absolutely, yes. And do we need to do it more? Yeah, I think we do. I notice, when I do casual managing staff shifts, as much as I can, if I see them, I always say thank you at the end of the night to each staff member before they go, not for anything in particular, but thank you with their name. So they feel at the end of the shift they've been noticed. And if someone does something, of quality work, then I would acknowledge that too. So acknowledgement, I think, can be take many forms, whether it's just hello, whether it's a smile down the street. Business smiles comes to mind because, you smile at someone and they light up. So that to me is an acknowledgement, or paying someone a compliment. Is that the same thing? I had a gorgeous friend in England, entertainer. She was tall, blonde, gorgeous. And she would turn heads in the street, but I'd walk down the street with her and she would tell me people are turning to look at me. So, and she always made me feel $1 million with her compliments and her, you look nice and whatever she used to say to me. Yeah. So just lifting up.
Would you say that a compliment is acknowledgement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to open that up a little bit later because compliments are something that we possibly need to learn how to reframe or accept better. So that's an opportunity that I think we can grow into. So thank you. So I'm just going to pop over Stacey, actually, if that's all right. And Stacey, same thing. Do we need to acknowledge each other more?
Yeah, I think we do. And I think by nature, people want to feel seen. And people want to feel that they belong. And I think that's the first part of belonging, is actually having people around you see you. And much like, Martyn had said, that I go out of my way to make sure that I actually make eye contact with everybody that I encounter on my trip, wherever I'm going. And especially the people that are working in in service roles, because so often people who are in service roles either get ignored or they get treated like garbage. So for me, it's always just looking at, and for me, it's a big thing. If someone has a name tag, then I always make sure that I check their name tag and I'll use their name. And so just even little things, it's, for me, I ended up being friends on Facebook with a bunch of people that worked at my local railway station, because it was I just started by having a chat with them as we were wandering up to get on the train. I would ask what their name was. I'd have a chat to them, and then I would ask them about their day, and then I would remember their name. And then as I got to know more things about them, then I would start to ask questions about that. And even every time that, someone had helped me, I'm always like, thank you so much for your help. I really appreciate it. And, and that could be a taxi driver. It could be, someone that held a lift for you, any of these little things. I think any interaction we have with people, I think even just the bare minimum of smiling and looking someone in the eye, that's acknowledging that I see you. And I think that's probably the base level part of it. I just see in the comments that Bob's mentioned about eye contact being important. And for me, I definitely feel it is, because it's that really, I see you. When you connect eyes with somebody, you see them. So I think that's super important. So that's something that I think is it's something that I don't think people do enough of. I think that particularly even during the pandemic, I think just because people had masks on, then it all of a sudden meant people didn't actually talk to each other or they didn't make eye contact with each other. And so that was something I did even more so during these last couple of years. If I was out anywhere, I actually went out of my way even more so, you know, to look someone in the eye and smile and say hi and ask them how they were. So I think, again, we don't do it enough. And, you know, as Kim said earlier, with that person that asked her the question about, you know, do you think you're full of yourself? And I think that the self-acknowledgement one that you sort of touched on there, Kim, is something that has been actively discouraged, and particularly I think in Australian culture, because there's that element of, again, do you think you're full of yourself? You know, who do you think you are? You know, you're a big head, you're a bit of a wanker, that type of thing, if you actually do give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back. So I think that both of these things I think are really important, the self-acknowledgement and the acknowledgement of those around us. I think it's a sort of starting point of, you know, the word connection has been mentioned again in the chat too. So I think that's the acknowledgement's the starting point of that connection.
And I love that, because I wish I could rewind this video right now and go back to when you were talking about the guys at the railway station. Your face lit up with the connection and how that hit you in the heart, and how much joy you get from one another just from acknowledging them, and them then becoming a part of your community, which has strengthened you as a person. But not only that, the energy it's created for you is just wonderful.
And it's also the energy for them, because that was one thing I used to see them as the train pulled in, and they'd be sort of walking up alongside the train with the ramp, and you actually saw their faces light up when they saw that it was me and not another passenger. And so there was one particular girl, she said to me, she goes, "Oh, you're my favorite passenger." And I said, "Really? Like, why?" She goes, "You're always so nice, and you actually talk to us, and you're positive." And I said, "Well, doesn't everyone say thank you?" She goes, "Hell no." Like, most people are just absolutely rude to them, at a minimum, or just, again, treat them like they're invisible, and just, actually have silence when they're interacting with them, and then just do what they need to do, and then just off they go with their day. So it's really nice to then get that acknowledgement back in return, to go, because you've done that, that's made such a big difference for their day as well. And especially for people that generally are copying the worst of people during the course of their day.
Yeah, I love that. Like, acknowledgement, the gift that it gives to people is so much further than just a smile. The people are dealing with things all day, every day. To get to know them, the curiosity, which I want to dive into a little bit later, I just think is amazing, because inside our connections, inside acknowledgement, every one of those connections grow. Talking about our connections and growing through acknowledgement, self-acknowledgement, is that going to help us grow? Kim?
Yeah, I take a deep breath when I respond. It's I think what Stacey touched on is society is kind of created that if we do acknowledge ourselves in some way, shape or form, we're highlighting ourselves, and therefore we could be seen to be bigger than and better than others. But it's not really the case. It's kind of maybe looking at a different framework by actually being proud of ourselves and sharing it. So the self-acknowledgement could be, being proud of what we've accomplished, and then sharing that with someone who you feel safe with, and knowing that you're not going to be judged. So I think that could be a really important, understanding to have, to know your audience, I suppose. Or start to teach people more about acknowledgement. And, I think, teach people to really sort of say, well, why is it bad? If we start to encourage ourselves and be kind to ourselves and acknowledge all the wonderful things that we're doing, because we're all doing so much. And I think we're actually doing more. I don't know, I feel like we're doing more now than what we do You know, I don't know. It feels like it's become busier. Everyone seems like we're doing so much since the pandemic. But one thing I did want to touch on, which Martyn and Stacey both shared as well, I think I really wanted to acknowledge that I agree with them around the eye contact. It was something I was brought up with. And some people, I think, who are shy find it hard to have eye contact, but it doesn't mean that they're not being acknowledged or acknowledging. But I think it's important because I feel like you can look at someone, but their names as well, activating someone by using their name. I think that's a really amazing thing. So I really loved what Martyn and Stacey shared. And I think even understanding, because everyone's got a different name and how it should be pronounced, that's probably another key thing that I do as well. And so I really loved how Martyn and Stacey shared that. So, yeah.
I like that, because one of the best things I feel you can do with somebody is actually ask them the pronunciation of their name if you're not sure. Instead of just having a go, listen, I love your name, can you just help me with the pronunciation? So I just want to get that right for you. Just saying that really opens up the opportunity. It acknowledges there's so many different levels, their culture, where they're from, you know, what they bring to the table, them as a person, wanting to know them. I think it's wonderful. So
Exactly.
I really want to jump on to how to acknowledge people in a little bit, because I think that's a great opportunity. I do want to just circle back a sec and go back to self-acknowledgement, because I also feel that with our culture at the moment, to actually acknowledge yourself for something you've done well, I feel uncomfortable with that. I feel uncomfortable with saying I've done a good job here, or I'm really proud of myself here. I'm learning, but I have to be around people that help me do that. So I want to, if it's okay, I would just like to dive a little bit further into self-acknowledgement. So, and I'm going to jump over to you, please, Stace, because you're nodding away and we've got something there to say, I'm sure. So self-acknowledgement, help us understand that a little bit more.
I think it starts with it needs a bit of practice, and I think that it's something that I use as part of my resilience work is asking people, you know, what was the best thing that happened in their day, or how did they help somebody, or, you know, what are they most excited about? I think through being asked these things to kind of elicit this, then I think that can be really helpful just to get into the practice of doing that, particularly in a family. So if you've got kids, so having those conversations around the dinner table or in the car on the way home from school. And it's like, again, what was the highlight? What did you learn? Like, what are you proud of? Those type of things. And I think the younger that we start making a practice of doing these things, then we're more likely to become comfortable in doing that. But also then we're more likely to then be asking those questions of those around us as well. And so then we can start to help other people to, to really recognize what they're doing. But I guess if there's not the, if there's not the people around that you can sort of bounce that off, even just starting with your own journal, when you keep a journal at the end of the night and actually writing down at the end of the day, like, what are the key highlights of your day? Like, what are you proud of? What did you do that surprised you? What happened that day where you surprised yourself? And then also too, I think not being too hard on the flip side, because I think we've got a tendency to beat ourselves up more than we have to pat ourselves on the back. So I think if we just start to get that practice, and it could just be, adding to the evening journal of a night, what am I most proud of today? Because I usually sort of get people to start with, what was the best thing that happened today? And the journal prompt that I encourage is, today I had the opportunity to. So I feel you could quite easily use that prompt as well to then do the, pat yourself on the back for something that you actually did or an experience you had, as well as, looking for what was the highlight of the day. Sometimes those things are going to be the same. The thing you're proud of and the highlight of the day, highly likely that there could.
Gotcha. Back again. Did Stacey just drop out then, or was that me?
I think so.
Yeah, perfect. No worries. We'll jump back on. But I think self-acknowledgement is something that I think is so important in building our own self-esteem. You know, the stronger we become as individuals, the stronger we can support our community. So I'd really like to see strengthening of ourselves and our acknowledgement of our achievements without sort of being ripped down. But I think that's, as Stacey said, something we really need to start working with the younger generation to support. Martyn, what's your theory on this, on self-acknowledgement?
Well, I think you've just taken the words out of my mouth, really. As Stacey said, you know, what did I do well today? So it can be almost like, you know, your gratitude journal and what you did well. What am I proud of? It's so easy to not do those things and think, yeah, not acknowledge ourselves. And as Kim said, if we're afraid of, you know, if there's judgment from people around us, we don't have to do it with people around us. It can just be our own, you know, our own little ritual, which, as you said, Scott, I think is the growth is, you know, self-acceptance, self-esteem, which we can then pass on to other people.
Yeah, I really feel that is the thing that we're all striving for. Sitting in front of me right now is 3 people that I know that have done a lot of work on themselves to build their own inner strength. They actually acknowledge people a hell of a lot, and that's why we're having this conversation, because 3 of the best people I know for acknowledging people, even in this conversation, you're picking up each other. Stacey, thank you for that. Scott, thank you for that. Kim, thank you for that. And then bringing that into the conversation, those little bits of acknowledgement make you feel heard. So, going to go a little bit, got a little bit of structure tonight, rather than just absolutely free flowing for a change, because I think it's really important. Right?
Martyn's like, what?
Yeah, I know, right? Today, acknowledgement is a big thing, because it is a difficult thing to stand up and have self-acknowledgement and, you know, be really proud of what you're doing. And I think it's so important. But I think we can build more of that by learning more about how to acknowledge each other. The more we acknowledge each other, the more strength we gain, the stronger we get, and the more esteem we have to actually say, hey, listen, I've done a great job here. I'm pretty proud of myself, you know. So I'm actually going to throw it over to you, please, Kim. How do we acknowledge each other?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that before. And one thing that Martyn just shared, which I really, really enjoyed, is the self-acceptance. And then what I loved about what Stacey said as well is reframing the words, saying I have had the opportunity. So what came to mind for me when I was hearing both of you speak, and I love these conversations that we is choosing words that we feel comfortable with, start with. So when Stacey said practice, because sometimes we can't actually acknowledge ourselves. So we can find words that we can start to acknowledge ourselves. So it might be like, haven't achieved that job, or you haven't got that new car that you wanted, or you're striving, you know, to get out of a crappy job. And so we can acknowledge ourselves by saying, I'm putting in the energy to look for a new job. So we can use words to actually point to the process of where we're at rather than the end result. And I think that's really important. And I work during the day in a project, and it's always about the outcomes. But I think we forget as individuals that we need to count the process. And so if we acknowledge the process and acknowledge ourselves and going, you know, giving ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back by saying, I've set 3 goals for myself today to bring 3 people, you know, and it's to either, you know, find a new job or look for a partner, or whatever the case might be for anyone, or, being more fulfilled within ourselves. We could set 3 little simple goals, and then just count that we might have achieved 1 or 2. And it's acknowledging ourselves, and saying, oh, I feel good, So, yeah, I kind of feel like that we need to acknowledge the process and us being in the process.
I love that, because the destination wouldn't happen without the journey.
Yeah.
And the journey so often tells so many tales. So acknowledging the journey is the actual story of the destination. I love that.
Yeah. And even acknowledging maybe the little frustrations, because we all get it as well. So there's not always going to be achievements, there's going to be frustration. So that's then acknowledging and going, okay, I've got some feedback. I'm either frustrated or I didn't get the answers that I wanted. Okay, and I'm still on the journey. I'm still in the process, and I'm just going to acknowledge it. But it's just pulling words that we can help support ourselves to kind of get back on track.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we're acknowledging where we're at is also such an important part of every conversation, because if you can just acknowledge that this is what it is, it gives you the opportunity to find out more information about it. Is this what it is? If it's not, tell me, and I'll teach me more so I can understand it. So acknowledgement in a conversation or in a situation of the situation is a pretty big key, I feel, to building better relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got to go around the room and actually ask for different ways to acknowledge each other. Just snowball some ideas. I'm going to ask you, Stacey, please.
I guess before we sort of jump into that, I just again want to just add on to what Kim was saying, that it's not always just acknowledging the great stuff. It's really important that we acknowledge the reality of situations as well. And particularly if we're looking at goal, if we're working towards something, then you've got to be realistic about where you are to start. So you've got to know what point A is, and you need to know what point B is. But you mentioned the word process, and I think that's a big one, because an acknowledgement, I think this is the thing, is acknowledging the process along the way, and recognizing that we can control the process, we can't control the outcomes. So if we focus on that and go, well, okay, what can you do every day to do that? So I think if we're looking at, as you said, about how we can acknowledge others, I think what I love is, Scott, you're the master of it, is just going, I see you, thank you for doing the best that you can right now. I'm like, what better acknowledgement could you give someone than that? Because that is not making a judgment on anything about their situation or anything. It's just going, I see you, I recognize that, whatever you're doing right now is the best you can do, and that's great. And I acknowledge that, I appreciate it, and I encourage that. So I think so verbally, just through the course of the day, it could be just, I think the other thing is just, send someone a text. Keep an eye out for things that are, the things that are happening around you. Even little things like, I know that, with Kim, I sent her a couple of messages yesterday because I saw an opportunity for her that was aligned with some of her business. And even by doing that, that's acknowledging that person, because that shows that you were thinking of that person. And when you saw something, you immediately thought of that person. And so that's acknowledging, going, okay, I see you, Kim. I see this is what you work on, and I see this could be a good fit for you. So, do that. And I think and particularly, I think with the people that are closest to us, I think just, again, making it a habit of looking for those things. And, it's at the dinner table conversation or the drive home from school or work. I think they're really good places to start. So, yeah, and before we get to that bit, it's the acknowledging ourselves first. So it comes back to that whole thing about the oxygen mask on ourselves first, and filling up the cup, and all of those things that we use to describe those situations. But I think the better we are at acknowledging ourselves, the better we are at going to be in being able to acknowledge those around us too, and I think just normalizing it as well. because I think that sometimes people might be uncomfortable with someone, recognizing them or thanking them, or just I see you. Some people might be quite happy to try and hide in the background and may not particularly like being a little bit of a spotlight shone on them. So I think it's, again, as Kim said, it's sort of with the audience testing the waters. Don't go and, have this big grand ticker tape parade for somebody that, you don't know what their level of comfort is with acknowledgement. But build up to the bigger stuff. But I think just start with the really small things, and the smallest point of contact is an eye contact and a smile, even without any verbal acknowledgement. I see you. I think that's a starting point.
Yeah, I love it. And I just want to grab something there, because like the people in the back of the room that aren't generally up front and want the big ticker tape parades, with their acknowledgement, you need to build it. Just acknowledging that and building that will build rapport rather than ignoring. I think that's an amazing opportunity. So thank you for that. Martyn, ways to acknowledge people?
Well, I think as I'd have to agree with Kim and Stacey, that tonight we should be asking you the questions, because you are the master of acknowledgement.
You are.
First of all, you can answer that in a minute if you like.
Let's do a cheers to that. With my cup of tea.
But I think, my pleasure. Acknowledging others, should be authentic and genuine, and really whenever it comes up. I mean, earlier tonight, my partner said, I've been to the gym. I just did 30 minutes on the treadmill and a bit of stretching, and I was tired, so I didn't do any more. I said, yeah, but you were at the gym. That's great. I acknowledged him for going, because he was like, oh yeah, I didn't do as much as I could have. And as we were talking earlier, acceptance, early tonight too, I quoted to my friend she's in a situation, and, I quoted one of my favorite quotes. When I argue with reality, I lose, but only 100% of the time, because she was in a state of anxiety, stress, whatever, in a situation which she has no control over. So I says, if you acknowledge that at the moment you can't do anymore, and that might, if you look at it differently and acknowledge this is a situation, you might have more peace in your life, because it's out of your control right now.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging a situation can make such a difference.
Yeah. We can go into stress mode or whatever mode, anxiety mode, and is it going to change anything?
It will, if you acknowledge it.
Yeah.
If you acknowledge the feeling and not acknowledge the scenario.
Yeah.
So acknowledging your friend in that moment, how did that change things?
She got it. I don't think it will make a lot of difference because of the way, just her personality and the way she is. But, I feel I have to, two things: do the best I can for her, and also not let her get away with constant negativity. So, I will pull her up, because, she said, oh, the world's a mess and blah, blah, blah. And I said, how does that make you feel? Miserable. Okay. Yeah. I said, well, if you keep thinking that, then you feel miserable. Is that, how's that? Do you want to feel miserable? It's the glass half empty or half full. But that's probably a whole other conversation. But yes, acknowledging a situation, yes.
Yes and no, though. I actually, this is something that I love in the acknowledgement space, right? Because you're acknowledging her by asking her how she feels. You're
So
acknowledging.
how does that make you feel when you say the world is a mess? How does that make you feel? Miserable. Okay.
But the curiosity going into that is acknowledgement, and it does make people feel safe. And that's the opportunity that I would like to put on the table right now, is that curiosity is a great way to acknowledge one another. Asking questions based upon the scenario they're talking, so they go into a deeper thought pattern of what's actually going on, brings up the emotions. Okay, so that's your emotion. What does that mean for you? Oh, okay. So what would you like to do about that? Oh, okay. Do you think that'll help the situation? Okay, that sounds great. How can I support you to implement that? Okay, no worries. Let's do that.
Yeah.
We've taken a whole scenario and we've just acknowledged every single part of it because we haven't put a piece of us inside that in that conversation. It's just been about being curious, asking, supporting.
Yeah.
That is one of the greatest forms of acknowledgement, I feel.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Acknowledging them for the situation they're in, and then asking some powerful questions. Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Correct. And I felt Kim come up with something. She needs something to get out right there.
I do. I'm loving it because what came up for me is that you were acknowledging her by being a resource for your friend. So you were holding the space and you were, kind of validating or, acknowledging her in where she was at. And it's quite funny because it made me laugh in the sense that my partner would say to me, I'm really frustrated. And I'm like, this is fantastic. So I'd be acknowledging him when he says, I'm really frustrated. And I'm like, this is great. And he goes, how is it great? And I'm like, this is great because this is the leverage point. And this is, which is what you were saying, Scott. So that's why I was getting all excited, thinking, because that's where the emotions are coming up. And I'm sure all of us at some point in our life, we know that that's when the frustration's coming up. That's when we know we can then look at the shift. We can look at the change, or we can stay in that. And I've even acknowledged friends who come across as being angry, but they're just passionate. And so I actually label it as going, I love your passion. And they look at me and they go, oh my God, everyone thinks I'm really angry. And I said, I can see that you are so passionate about this topic and others are not understanding who you are. And so, look, coming from someone who is quite passionate, I've been misunderstood on a number of levels. But I think it's really nice to hold people in that space when someone's so passionate about a topic or, and some of these friends were like non-vaxxers and they were really passionate. And I'm like, this is great. And whilst I was the opposite, I still held that space for them. And I said, what's your language or your words that you're going to use in order to execute on your message? So then you're being acknowledged. So it was quite a cool thing. And they loved that because I said, I want you to be confident in owning that, which goes back to what you sort of said, Scott, before about the self-esteem being, and, Stacey and Martyn both touched on it as well. The self-acceptance and, really acknowledging ourselves, and where we want to go. So, yeah, anyway, that was my rant.
No, well, look, I absolutely adore that because, just asking those questions and acknowledging people and digging deeper actually brings about more self-acceptance.
Yes.
because they're curious. You're getting answers to an emotion. You're getting answers to an opportunity. Although they might be coming just from you, you're actually building strength and conviction in what's going on for you. So I love that. You know, one of the things for me that I absolutely adore is acknowledgement without words. I think it's so important. Oscar and I have a great relationship, and it's something that I've always done with him is high fives without words. High fives and knuckles always. With all the little kids when I used to do Auskick, I'd walk past and give knuckles to say I see you. I'm here. High five, good job. And I think it's so important, those little things. Even today, you know, if Oscar's in the back of the car, he's 11. I still put my hand in the back of the car. High five. Go, big man. Just letting you know that I see you there. And I want you to know that although I'm not sitting with you, I'm here, you know, just acknowledging you. Because those little tiny pieces of acknowledgement consistently build up to something pretty special, you know. And I think it's one of the most important things we can do is to find ways to acknowledge people in different ways. For me, Mr. Jones. But high fives, knuckles. I just love it. So, Stacey, sorry, Mr. Jones.
It just reminded me of Mel Robbins' high five habit. Anyone, do you know that?
No.
That was her latest book, High Fiving Yourself in the Mirror.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. And she wrote a book on it, and she went into this, you know, like the science of it. Yeah. So high five, which is not an easy thing to do. You have to look into your own eyes and, you know, give yourself a high five. But it really powerful. So I just thought it was worth mentioning. Having, you know, you said you high five with Oscar, but yeah, another way of acknowledging yourself in the mirror with a high five.
Love that.
Yeah. She's like, that's probably the most daunting place in the world to be, isn't it? In the mirror.
Yes.
You know, and to find strength in that place is amazing. So I'm just going to throw this comment up quickly from Bob, because I love this. Why are we here? To lift each other, right? That's why we're in the Campfire Project, to lift each other, to grow, to be a part of each other, you know, and to sit and listen and find new ways to do things. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So, you know, acknowledging it right there. So I want to, Stacey, is there anything else you'd like to share in that?
Oh, I love how you mentioned about finding ways without actually speaking to do it, and like I'm big on the fist bumps myself. So especially it's like when we're in the gym, and it's like I do that with my boyfriend's son, and he's 12, and he's just getting so excited about the gym. So it's like every time he sort of pushes himself that bit harder, it's like, you're a machine, Jono, and just like fist bump. But I like the fist bumps. But I think even just obviously the eye contact and the smile, even for people we don't know. But sometimes even just that little nod. Sometimes, you know, when you see something and you might just a little bit of a nod. And sometimes it could be even, I guess
you had a little bit of a wink in there as well, Stace.
That's just organic, isn't it? But also too, sometimes it's like I think it can be really uncomfortable to do, but it's good getting on to what the Mel Robbins about using the mirror. Like the mirror is so powerful. You know, for me, it's like when I clean my teeth, I make sure I'm actually looking at myself eye to eye the whole time, and just taking that time to connect in that way. But sometimes it could be, you know, you just could be out somewhere, you know, walking down the street, and as you might catch yourself in the mirror or something. You know what? Just give yourself a little nod in the mirror. just think, you know, those type of things, these little things that might sound, you know, might feel a bit wanky at first, but get a bit more of a spring in your step. But I think, yeah, just a little nod, little, you know, hat tip. We've gone a bit old school. But even in other things, like, you know, pop a note in the mail to somebody. Like that's something that, you know, rarely happens these days. And, you know, it could just be a little thing like that. I think it's, just ultimately it's just when we come down and we get what we look for. So, you know, if we're constantly looking around and we're actually being present in the moment, and I think this is a big thing about this acknowledgement, it's to truly embrace that we need to be present in the moment, and then to be observant for things around us. So I think just being conscious of that and finding fun ways to do it. And it could even be just, again, I think as Martyn said before, it needs to be, these things need to be genuine and authentic. But it could just be that, if you're going to do your groceries or something, actually, make a little bit of a challenge to yourself to go, I'm going to make sure that I acknowledge however many people that I've never seen before in my life before. Just to start to create that habit, but then it's just something that'll help you feel good as well.
That's the part I love. Like, I'm probably the most selfish person around. I'll walk around saying thank you to people for doing their best right now, because it makes me feel good to be present with somebody I don't. And I'm just going to share a quick story that I went to get some flowers for my mum for her birthday. And there's this gorgeous little shack on this farm. And the gentleman's name is Ming. And Ming jumps on his bicycle from the house. The buzzer goes off. He rides down with a big smile every single time. And I love it. I was sitting there with him. I said to Oscar, Oscar runs the car. He goes, okay, Dad. He knows. He's pulling out a pair of socks, and we go running up to him. And I just said to him, Ming, I said, I really want to thank you for always having a beautiful smile for us. You're always so happy. Can you tell me about you? And I go, oh. He said, what do you mean? I said, so when did you come here? When did you come to Australia? He goes, oh, my family came here in, I think it was 1980, 81, something around there, in the 80s. I said, oh, brilliant. I said, so how's things progressed for you? He goes, well, I started off working for Van Wyck Flowers, and I learned how to grow flowers. I saved up enough money and I bought this block of land. I started growing my own flowers to sell to little florists. And he goes, but this here, I love this. He's been doing it for 30-something years.
Wow.
And the smile he comes with every single time. So to learn his story, he was so surprised that I asked, and I enjoyed it. But Oscar's sitting there, and I feel so connected to him. I love going past him, just with that little bit more connection. So my life is stronger because I've acknowledged him and wanted to understand him. And I think that's the thing for me that I adore. Like, it's the story of Alan Stevens and I meeting. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was surreal. Here I was trying to own my story, trying to share my story. I'm standing in front of a man who's a profiler that I didn't know. And I said to him, I said, I don't think I have anything to say that you actually want to hear. And he held me accountable for that. That's a story for, basically he held me accountable for about 15 minutes, let me sit in silence. But once he was able to speak, he's like, wow, that was awesome. Thank you so much. And I felt like $1 million, especially when I'm exposing myself. I'm exposing me. And to acknowledge me in that moment of just trying to own me, wow. Now look what happens. I turn up here every Thursday and have a conversation with you. But that acknowledgement is just, and I think that's something for me that I have learned more than anything else in life, is acknowledgement comes from learning one another. And it's the greatest gift we can give one another. I grew. When I met Stace, it was one of the most beautiful scenarios. I met Stace at a conference for David Goggins, my hero, and I come away with Stacey being my highlight. Kim, I've met through the Campfire Project, that's taken me into her home, gifted me her home to come and stay with her family. To get to know Kim, she interviewed me and just held me, so I opened up conversations. Mr. Jones, I met you through a men's group where I could feel you, and I touched your heart with my words of appreciation for you.
You acknowledge me. Yeah. That's how we met.
And look at the beauty in our relationships because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite powerful.
Yeah, very.
Very extremely powerful. And it's the depth we can go to because of the acknowledgement. Stacey, we sit, we talk about lighthouses. And, you know, like Kim, you and I are constantly talking about the kids and the family and honesty and holding each other accountable. And sometimes it's not comfortable, but that's okay because we've got each other because of the acknowledgement we share with each other, acknowledgement of the situation, acknowledgement of what's happening. So I'm actually really proud. I'm actually really proud of the Campfire Project. I'm really proud of the connections I've built with each of you. I'm proud of the connections I'm growing to have because of the Campfire. Bob, tonight, your involvement's been amazing. Auntie Shaz, mate, love you with all my heart through the Campfire because we've taken the time to get to know one another, acknowledging each other's past and what situations we've been through without judgment. And that's, for me, everything. You know, I'm talking a bit tonight, and I'm going to ask more questions, but I think this is something that I'm so proud of the Campfire Project. I'm proud of the individuals sitting here tonight. And yeah. So thank you all for being in my life. I really appreciate you, you know, and I do what I can because each of you acknowledges and appreciates me. So from my heart, I can't thank you enough. Almost got a tear out of me. Almost. That's right. All right.
Thank you.
Some ways to go forward, but anyway. So we're getting already at 51 minutes, and you know that's the joy of having these conversations when we do sit here and appreciate each other because we sit here and we listen. And I think it's the most underrated skill that we have in acknowledging people. It's just the ability to listen, sit, look in the eyes, and ask questions. So I'm actually going to ask everybody for how could you, or what is the best way you can acknowledge somebody? Mr. Jones.
Well, as I said earlier, I think by an authentic comment to them, whatever it might be, just being authentic. And I think, you know, when we're acknowledging other people, when we're trying to lift them up, as we've been talking about, I mean, doesn't that help us if we're having a bad day? It takes us out of our own crap anyway. So it's such a beautiful thing to do, to help the other person and help ourselves.
I love it. Thank you. Stacey.
I feel that the best way we can acknowledge anybody, because I think the first question that popped into my head when you said that was like, okay, so maybe it depends on who. And then I was like, no, it doesn't depend on who. This is universal, regardless of whether it's somebody we're meeting for the first time or somebody that, you know, we've known forever. I think the best way we can acknowledge someone is just by being fully present with them. And you mentioned listening, you know, and being curious, but I think our attention, our undivided attention, our full presence with somebody, I think acknowledges them, I think more than anything really we can say will do. Because again, it comes back to, you know, we go to the Maya Angelou quote, you know, people won't remember what you did, they won't remember what you said, but they're always going to remember how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
So by being fully present at any given time with somebody, I think that's the best way we can make people feel seen.
Mm.
I love it. Best gift is presence. Thank you, Stacey. Kim.
So when you asked that question, I was kind of thinking about how I do it. And I actually only realized the other day because I was actually explaining it to a guy who I'd never met before. And he said to me, Kim, this has been the most incredible conversation. And I was giving him my energy for the half an hour. And what I realized is I shared with him how I was listening to his words, how I was understanding his business, and wanting to understand the meaning, because there was something missing for him. So I used my listening skills, like what you said, Scott, which I think is really underrated. And I was curious. So I asked really leading questions, which is what Martyn and Stacey have both shared, asking questions in understanding more about the person. And so he felt so acknowledged, this particular guy. And when I think about it, and I think Stacey might have touched on it, is sometimes people are not open to kind of receiving that attention or the acknowledgement. And so in doing that, it's kind of nice for us to share why we're doing that. So I sort of said to him, I'm just really interested in, helping you understand more about your business, because I felt like what you were sharing with me, there was something missing for you. And he said, yeah, it was. And he said, I've never had this type of conversation. And so it was really nice to kind of have that framework shared to him in a way that he was open. But yeah, and I could tell that he was kind of open, and but like what Stacey said, it's universal. And so I feel like that's what I do offer by listening, the conversations I have with Martyn and Stacey, we ask questions, all of us. We're asking questions. We're actually really interested in that person. And like what Stacey said with the train people, she's smiling, and even Martyn saying, looking at people in the eyes. We've got all these connection points with our sensories. Yeah. I think, what we've shared tonight has been incredible. Just, hearing everything. So, yeah, quite incredible. You're all amazing. I love all of you. I love all of you. I love everyone.
And that's also the genuine truth, though. Like it's actually love within this little circle of people, because we've sat here, we've gotten to know each other, we appreciate each other. So I really want to thank you for that bit of advice for everybody. I'm going to finish tonight on a quick little story, and it's around acknowledgement, also a little bit of appreciation. Because it doesn't matter who you are, we all need to be acknowledged. We all need to feel that little bit of self-worth. It makes everything better.
Yeah.
So the other day I was down at the local shopping centre, IGA, and I see a film crew sitting there. Didn't think much of it. Anyway, I've walked around, and I've always got socks on me. I've always got them. It's very important to me, because you never know who I'll run into. So anyway, so I grabbed my bits and pieces, and I've come back past, and they finished filming. So I've walked up to the big guy that they were interviewing, and I just said, mate, I just really want to thank you for doing your best right now. It's been an interesting couple of years, and this is my local IGA, and I really want to thank the staff for putting their best foot forward under difficult opportunities. I really appreciate that. It just happens to be the CEO of Richie's IGA.
Yep.
He was blown away that somebody thanked him.
Wow.
Not only did I thank him, and I was with my words, I then said, "What's your?" So sorry, I've just realised you're the CEO. I've just read your badge. I guess, how did you become that? As well, actually, it's an interesting story. I've been at IGA for 47 years.
Oh.
I said, no way. So can you share that with me? And she said, well, actually, I started out as a 16-year-old boy down at the Frankston store, and I just was doing it part-time, building up while I was going through the uni. As I progressed my career through IGA and I got my uni degree, I found roles within IGA. That's led me into a 47-year career inside IGA. I said, that's phenomenal. I said, that's such a beautiful story of how a local boy works hard, stays good, and stays with it. He goes, actually, I'm really proud of that. And I'm like, thank you so much for sharing that. What are you doing today? Because actually, I'm filming with Channel 9 because, the big two, Coles and Woolies, they're always out there. But we're starting to make a difference. We care. And I'm like, yeah, you do. And then we got into the opportunity of just what he was up to and how he was doing it. I'm so proud to have that moment with somebody that also needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether it's your local policeman, your local baker, your local drug addict, your local counsellor, your local person sleeping rough, your local teacher, your local librarian, your local service attendant, your local cleaner. I can go on and on about the people in our community. But how wonderful is it we're sitting here smiling, thinking about them. And you're now thinking about ways you can acknowledge them. And I hope that hits your heart. So on that note, I'm just going to say a massive thank you to the beautiful people in the Campfire Project community. I adore this place. I adore this place because we have conversations about things that really touch our heart, pleasant and unpleasant. But because we sit here and acknowledge and accept and appreciate each other, we can talk about anything.
Yeah.
Thank you, campers. Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you so much, Martyn. Thank you so much, Stacey, for a beautiful conversation about acknowledgement. Take care, campers. Right, where is that bloody button?